When it comes to losing weight, the type of carnivore you choose can have a massive impact on your results. So in this video, I'll break down which type of carnivore is most effective for fat loss and which ones you'll want to avoid. We're going to compare a standard carnivore diet, which includes everything. We're going to look at beef, butter, bacon, eggs. We're going to look at a meat and eggs version of carnivore, as well as the lion diet. So let's get into it. Standard carnivore diet includes everything: meat, eggs, dairy. If it's an animal product, it is included, with the exception of honey. The reason honey is not included is, well, it's not a carnivore food. Honey is essentially nectar that bees have consumed. They then partially digest it and vomit it back out. So when you're consuming honey, you're technically actually consuming plants. Now, a standard version of a carnivore diet can be a great place to start for many people. It makes it easy to transition from a standard diet to a carnivore diet, as there's just lots of variety. But I see two main issues with this approach. The first is that dairy can bring many cravings. See, the thing with cravings is they're largely dopaminergic, which is a fancy way of saying it's due to the amount of pleasure we get from sweet things. When you consume something sweet, it is incredibly pleasurable, and you get a massive release of a hormone known as dopamine, which essentially acts as a pleasure hormone. Now, the human psyche is wired in a way where it's constantly trying to seek pleasure or avoid pain. So because this provides it with so much pleasure, in order to get pleasure, you start thinking about these foods and start craving them. Now, the good thing is that after 2 weeks of not consuming something, your brain forgets how much pleasure it got and it stops craving it. But the problem lies in dairy, is that, well, it's still sweet. So you never get through this 2-week period because you're constantly reminding your brain how nice sweet things are. So for a lot of people, consuming dairy can trigger cravings, and you're much more likely to slip off the diet. Now, even if you are someone who doesn't start to crave other things when you consume dairy, dairy itself can actually be a significant hindrance when it comes to fat loss. Milk and other dairy products such as yogurt that contain carbohydrates are worst of all. The problem with carbohydrates is that they give you a significant blood sugar spike, much higher than when you're consuming something with just fats and protein. Now, in order to bring this blood sugar back down, because it's toxic to you, another hormone known as insulin elevates. Now, insulin's primary objective is to bring your blood sugar back down, but insulin has a number of roles in the body. And when insulin elevates, it actually blocks another hormone called leptin. Now, leptin's job is to say to your brain, hey, we're full, we can stop eating. So for many people, when you consume carbohydrates, you never feel truly full. A great example of this that many people experience is when you eat a massive meal, you're completely stuffed, but then you go, you know what, I'll have some dessert. And all of a sudden you're hungry again. You've consumed the carbohydrates, your blood sugar's elevated, and all of a sudden you don't feel completely full again. As well as the fact that on carnivore, you eat till you're comfortably stuffed. You eat till you're no longer hungry. Now, dairy is very high in energy in comparison to how filling it is. So if you ate a block of cheese till you're full, and you ate a steak till you're full, you'd end up consuming a lot more energy eating the block of cheese. And remember that fat is stored energy. In order to burn fat, we must burn more energy than we consume. So if we can minimize the total amount of energy we're consuming, we're just going to burn a lot more fat, and it'll significantly speed up the weight loss. In fact, recently someone I know experienced this. They started carnivore and said, Max, do you have any advice for me? So I said, be very careful with the amount of dairy you're consuming. So they said, all right, you know what, for the first 30 days, I'm just going to have no dairy. And they lost a lot of weight. I think it was about 4 kilos to be precise. And after 30 days, they felt like having something else. So they started incorporating a bit of dairy. They'd put heavy cream in their coffee. They'd put a bit of cheese on their meat. Well, probably more than a bit of cheese by the sounds of things. And what ended up happening is they gained half the weight they lost back in a pretty quick time frame. So for many people, I think eliminating dairy is a good thing. So what a lot of people tend to opt for is another version of carnivore, a meat and eggs only version. This is personally what I use, and I find this is great. It leaves me feeling satiated. You still get that bit of variety. I can't really find too many faults with this version of carnivore when it comes to a fat loss perspective. Me personally, I find that I end up eating less when I include eggs in my diet, simply because I find that eggs are just so satiating. When I eat eggs, I feel very full, especially if I have them with some beef, or some other meat for that matter. Next up, we have the beef, butter, bacon, eggs version of the carnivore diet, made famous by none other than Dr. Ken Berry himself. Now, I like this version a lot, but again, I do see a few potential downfalls with it. For starters, what a lot of people do is they consume large quantities of butter. Now, some people can get away with this. They can eat butter and still lose weight. But again, remember, fat loss is due to an energy deficit. Yes, on carnivore, your metabolism's a lot faster, you end up burning a lot more energy, and you also end up eating a lot less because your hunger regulates. But if you are consuming massive quantities of butter, which is incredibly energy dense, there are a lot of people that will find that it just hinders your weight loss. If you are going to do this version of a carnivore diet, I would be very careful with the amount of butter you're consuming. Now, another problem with this version is the quality of bacon. What a lot of people don't do is look at the ingredients list on the bacon they're consuming. Often with bacon, which I mean is unbelievable, it will quite literally be 80% pork, and the remaining 20% is other ingredients, often chemical additives such as preservatives. And what they'll sometimes do is add ingredients that contain carbohydrates. And remember earlier how I talked about carbohydrates blocking your hunger signaling and potentially making you hungrier. Another way that these ingredients can stall weight loss is by slowing down your metabolism. When you're consuming these chemical additives, they're damaging all of your cells. Now, when your cells are damaged, they produce less energy, and then throughout the day, you'll move a lot less. You'll see this with the average person on the standard American diet. They sit there all day doing not much, and then later in the day, instead of going for a walk, instead of doing something active, they'll just sit on the couch because they have such poor energy. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen to you, but what can happen to some individuals, especially individuals who are super sensitive, is that you'll find that you just have less energy throughout the day, and therefore you end up moving a lot less. Now, this is what is known as NEAT, stands for Non-Exercise Activity Thermogenesis. And in studies, they've found that NEAT can vary person to person between 2,000 calories per day, which is the equivalent of 2 massive steaks. So if you really are trying to optimize your fat loss, I'll be very careful about these sneaky little ingredients that they put in there. And finally, lion diet, which is essentially just ruminant meat such as beef and lamb. Now, when it comes to a health perspective, lion diet is definitely the best. Ruminant animals are animals that have a very complex digestive system. Their stomachs have 4 chambers, which makes them very effective at breaking down what they eat. So as a result, say in comparison to a monogastric animal, such as a chicken or a pig, their meat is incredibly pure. It contains absolutely no toxins. So from a fat loss perspective, this is perfect. Your cells will have absolutely no inflammation. They're firing as optimally as they possibly can. And so therefore your NEAT will be as high as it possibly can be. And you essentially turn into a fat burning machine. It also makes it much harder to overeat. And because you're consuming as close to 0 carbohydrates as you possibly can, your hunger signaling is not going to be affected at all. But what can happen for some people on the lion diet is that simply because it is so restrictive in the sense that you're eating the exact same thing for every meal, is that boredom can set in and you can slip off the diet. So essentially, for a lot of people, lion diet is the best fat loss diet, but for others, you're better to incorporate other things. Personally, I found this. I found that when I was on the lion diet, I sort of just wanted to eat other things, which is why for me personally, a lion diet plus eggs is what I find best. So in my opinion, a meat and egg version of the carnivore diet is the best for fat loss, followed closely by lion, but that is person dependent. For some people, lion will be better. Third is the beef, butter, bacon and eggs version, simply because you're avoiding dairy, which is the number 1 hindrance to fat loss on carnivore. And the worst version, which is still a great option, is a standard carnivore diet. But I mean, again, it's very person dependent. Let me know your experience with each diet down below. Now, if you are going to stick with a regular carnivore diet, there are 5 foods which I highly recommend you avoid. In fact, it'll shock you with how harmful some of these carnivore foods really are. In this video, I break down why.